The House Senate Conference Committee on Financial Regulatory Reform will reconvene at noon Eastern today. Representative Spencer Bachus is the ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee and a FinReg conferee. It's good to see you, Congressman. What's the realistic timeline? We hear a lot of different things. Our guest host doesn't think it's doable Thursday, but it is doable before the 4th. What do you think?
Well, I think that's true. I think by Thursday or Friday, at least by Saturday of this week, it will come out of conference, and then it will be presented to the House and the Senate. And that's just an up and down vote. There won't be any amendments on the floor, so easily sometime next week, I think you'll see a bill go to the President.
And what do we know about it at this point, in your view? What's coming out?
Well, it's large and it's an overreach, and I would have hoped for a smaller bill that actually addressed what we have seen in the last 2 or 3 years. We still have this alphabet soup of regulators, each of them looking at a particular company or a particular industry. So companies shift their focus to sort of live in the gaps, and Republicans had asked for a unified regulator to look at the whole system. We don't see that. The biggest problem I see is that although the regulators do need more tools to address resolution of a failing company, this didn't put too big to fail to bed. In fact, it just shifted it onto the taxpayers. What you really needed was to not promise creditors and counterparties of failing companies that you're going to bail them out, and there's a massive bailout fund in this bill.
Now, Congressman, to the public, I would think, and to most people looking closely at it, I mean, this is important legislation. We have no idea now about the Volcker rule, what it's going to look like, how many exceptions there are going to be, the derivative language. It just seems so haphazard and so seat of the pants at this point. We still don't know. Do we exactly who's going to be taken care of and which lobbyists are actually going to make some headway? Is this? I know it's sausage, but I don't want to eat. Do we want to eat this sausage? I mean, you're not selling this very well.
No, Joe. As far as derivatives, you're going to shift the cost to the Main Street. You're going to shift it to the end users. This bill actually doesn't do anything to rein in Wall Street. It's going to punish community banks, credit unions, Main Street institutions, which really didn't cause this crisis. So as far as where this bill leads, next it goes to the federal regulators, and they've got about 400 rules that they're going to have to draft over the next year. So we're probably going to see the uncertainty continue instead of a tightly written bill that could have given us some predictability.
Now, Congressman, staying with your last point about that there will be a lot of rules written in the future, two things. You have always supported the theme that there ought to be a tight connection between consumer protection and safety and soundness. Have you been able to make any progress on that in this bill?
Mark, I hadn't, and whoever the director of this new Consumer Protection Agency will be, she'll basically have, or he or she will have carte blanche to really write the rules as she sees fit. And although the Senate did tighten up the regulators, but they still don't have really a veto power. And you know, the best way to protect safety and soundness is to protect the consumer. But if you do what we did in Fannie or Freddie, where you just say we're going to make loans for social reasons, we're going to make loans to people with poor credit, and you undermine the safety and soundness of the system, you know, that's the worst thing that can happen to the consumers. We've seen that in the last 2 years.
Well, following up on that same theme, I know from the current regulators that I've talked to, the people that have been doing consumer regs for years, are very concerned about the fact that there is some likelihood that there might be a separation of the rule writing from the inspection or of the banks, and so that the existing regulators will be in charge of enforcing those rules, but not have a role in writing them. Do you have a concern that the people who will ultimately be writing those regs will not be the people that have done that over the last several iterations of bills?
Oh, absolutely, Mark. And as you know, the examiners in the bank should be an early warning system to safety and soundness policies. You know, if you have consumer rules that are not only bad for the consumer, but they're also bad for the financial system as a whole, it's going to show up first, you know, at the grassroots, and you're going to have a consumer regulator in Washington that won't really have those eyes in the field.
Congressman, the complaint about health care was that it was done in sort of in a closed-door, party-line vote, incompatible with an open, transparent legislative process. I guess you'd say the same thing is happening in this case, but is there any... It seems like there might not be the public outcry against this because, you know, it's almost a populist... I think that they have the public on their side in this case. I mean, is there any political ground to be gained there for Republicans?
Well, Joe, this is an issue that you can demagogue very easily and say you want financial reform because of everything bad you've seen, the high salaries and the failures on Wall Street, which impacted all of us. But the public, you know, they understand that they'd like to go to their own doctor and make their own health care choices. When it comes to financial regulation, they really probably don't get the connection between what a derivative means to them and how it affects them. So it is something that they're somewhat not familiar with. And so as far as whether this has been an open, honest process, I will say this. The Senate and House conferees, the Democratic conferees, have allowed Republicans to make some positive changes. We did that with some whistleblower and ombudsman legislation with the SEC that we think will make the SEC better able to pick up on things like Madoff and Sanford. So they have allowed us to make some changes around the margins. But you have to remember, this is a Democrat bill. When we say yesterday they worked out something on interchange fees, that was Democrats sitting down with Democrats and working out a deal which really didn't help consumers. It didn't help Main Street banks or credit unions. It did give some relief for Visa and MasterCard, but that was all the Democrats doing.
Congressman, thank you. We appreciate it. A good lead into our next segment we're going to have with SEC Director of Enforcement. Thank you. Okay, see you later.